It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the ASUS PG32UQX's OSD on-screen display menu system. The OSD is controlled by quite a novel mechanism, mainly by this little dial here, and you rotate that left and right to go up and down, or next and previous really in the menu system. There are also two shortcut keys either side of that. I'll show you that very shortly. First of all though, I want to go through the lighting features of the monitor, as I know some people will just be interested in this aspect rather than the rest of the OSD. There's a power LED. You can't really see that from a normal viewing position. Faces downwards, it's quite neatly tucked away actually. You can see it's red at the moment. That indicates that G-Sync is being used, or G-Sync is available. If you enable HDR, whether you've got G-Sync active or not, that becomes green. And if you disable G-Sync and HDR, it glows white instead. And it glows amber when the monitor is in a low power state, so it loses signal to the system. There are actually three separate lighting features on this monitor. You'll see here in the OSD under lighting effect, there's a feature called Aura Sync. That is a slider, and if you slide that, it means that rather than the OSD controlling the feature, you'll be using software such as ASUS's Armoury Crate software, which I'll link to in the description of the video. If you want to use the software to control it, I will show you that very shortly, you can do so. Otherwise, you can just select Aura RGB. So there are two Aura RGB or Aura Sync lighting features. There's the rear cover and the base. So you can see the various options there: rainbow, color cycle, static breathing, strobing or off. I'm not going to go through all of these, at least not with the rear cover. The base has the same options and essentially does the same thing with a different style, so I'll show you that, but the rear cover anyway. So that was the Republic of Gamers logo at the rear of the monitor. The base, that projects a stencil down onto the desk, and that's another Republic of Gamers logo, or you can create your own. It gives you a few blank lens covers if you want to create your own and you're creative like that. So I've just turned on the color cycle, so you can see that projected onto the desk beneath the monitor. Alternatively, you can select static, so you can select the colour that it will stay. So you've got red, green, blue, cyan, magenta and yellow. Or you've got the same, but you can have it doing a breathing pattern instead. So it just pulses gently. Or there's strobing. And that will more rapidly flick on and off. There's also light in motion, and that's just a little feature at the top of the stand. You can set that to 3 different brightness levels. I'm just going to set it to level 1 so you can actually see the detail of the light on the video. So that's all it is. Just a little emblem at the top of the stand. It kind of creates a tiny glow on the wall that's exaggerated in the video, and you can't actually see that from the front, and it's not very bright at all. It just appears exaggerated and bright in the video. Alternatively, you can use Armoury Crate software, and again there's a link to that in the description of the video. There are various different things you can control here actually, including the OLED Live Dash, which I'll show you shortly, but I'm just going to focus on the lighting features for now. There's also a game library feature, and basically you can map different scenarios to different games, which means you can have a different volume for your system and a different Aura Sync effect for different games. But if you click on Aura Sync there, you'll see it says no devices available. The reason for that is because I didn't activate the Aura Sync slider in the OSD. You also have to have the USB cable connected, the USB upstream cable connected to the monitor, and that connects to the monitor's USB-B port, which is the square-shaped one. So I've now activated Aura Sync. Hopefully that will be picked up by the software. I might need to restart the software, I'm not sure. So you can see it's listed there as ROG Swift, or ROG Swift, depending on how you want to pronounce it, PG32UQX. I didn't even have to restart the software. And if you click on the arrow, that is how you configure the live dash feature, which I'm not going to do just now. I'll show you that very shortly, but I'm just going to focus on the lighting feature for now. So you need to click on Aura Effects. There's also something called Aura Creator, but that doesn't work, at least it doesn't work on my system or my unit. It's possible that you need other Aura Sync peripherals to actually use that, but if you click on that, it basically just says, well, it says for me, no device is available. But you can configure many things here just with the Armoury Create software and Aura Effects feature. Various different gradient effects or rainbow effects. You can select one of those. You can also change the speed. And speaking of speed, it does take a while to actually load the effect in, it seems. Rather slow. I think it's only a bit slow the first time you do it, then it will speed up. So seems to be struggling a little bit. There we are. Seems to have actually turned the feature off, which is a bit strange. So, and I'm not sure why it's done that. Perhaps I'll have to re-enable it in the OSD or something like that. So something you should know about these videos is I like to keep them as unedited as possible. So when I do come across issues like this, I do like to share them, you know, because not everything in life is perfect. So I've reselected Aura Sync. It seems to be strobing, which is what I'd selected before. It could have been my fault. Maybe it's because I really should have reopened the software, so I'll do that. Well, it seems to be working with the static one, so you can select a static colour. You've got a nice colour wheel there, or you can even select the RGB values yourself, so full customization there. It's very nice. Various breathing patterns and strobing, so that was the same as what I showed you in the OSD, but you've got more flexibility over the colours you select. Colour cycle. No settings available, so that's just a standard cycle of colours, preset. Rainbow, this is what I was trying to show you before, kind of messed up a bit, but seems to be working now. And I think it really was that I needed to just reopen the software, because I enabled Aura Sync whilst the software was open. I think that confused it, and it didn't have that big loading thing that lasted for ages this time as well, so it's just working better. So you see there are various different patterns. I'm not going to go through all of these, because that would be extremely tedious. Starry Night, not sure what that is. Okay, just a different flashing pattern. You can select a different background colour and foreground colour, it would seem. So that's quite interesting. You can have it dancing to music if you'd like. So I've got one of my videos playing in the background. It's not exactly music to your ears, unless you like the sound of my voice, in which case I suppose it could be considered that. Just be aware that you need to actually have the audio passed through the monitor for this to work, which I assume most people won't be doing. I certainly don't do that. And although that's still playing, it doesn't seem to be flashing. So it's not responding to the sound, even though it's now passed through the monitor. I've reopened Chrome, same thing, doesn't seem to be working. But maybe it will if I change it to something else. And it seems to be doing that perpetual loading thing again, which isn't very promising, I have to admit. And that is still playing. So this basically isn't doing what I expect it to do. It doesn't seem to be doing anything, but I've got a lot to cover here, so I'm just going to move on. Adaptive colour. So that allows you to select an image and then have the colour of lighting based on that. Or there's dark, which it seems to be doing anyway, which just turns the thing off. And it seems to be just not responding at all now, so I seem to have killed it off. But anyway, I think you get the idea. Not exactly the most seamless experience. Personally, I'm not really too fussed about this feature. I prefer having a nice aura of light behind the monitor, something like that. And I don't mean like the lighting feature at the rear, which you can only see from the rear. I mean something which would cast a nice halo around the monitor, could be used as a bias light, and that's not offered by this model. Oh, just something to mention before I move on. The lighting feature does actually stay on if the signal to the computer is lost, so it goes into standby. But if you turn the monitor off using the power off feature, which I'll show you when I get to it, then it will turn the lighting feature off as well. I'm now going to go through the live dash feature. You can find that in the system setup section of the menu. PC control will allow you to use Armoury Crate to control it. Again, you need it connected to USB upstream on the monitor. To use that, you need a system connected to USB upstream. But if you're using OSD control instead, there's an FPS counter feature, game visual and input source. There's also timer and stopwatch, and they're greyed out unless you have those functions active. And you can have as many of these as you want active at the same time. So the timer feature and the stopwatch, they're found in Game Plus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a countdown timer to 30 minutes. I'll just quickly show you that. So if I now go to Live Dash, you'll see that timer's available for me to use. And the live dash is still off, and that's because I have set the brightness to off. You need to also have that set to your desired brightness level, which isn't off. Let's set it to level 3, which is the brightest. And you'll see there, it now displays a timer. It won't just display that constantly. You'll see it wipes the screen every now and then. The reason for that is because it is an OLED, an organic LED display, and it's going to burn in if it's displaying the same content for too long, so it will do that periodically. I've now got it set to display the FPS counter, game visual and input source, so you'll see it just cycles between those different things. I've now got the FPS counter alone active, and I've got the G-Sync pendulum demo active, and you'll see that it's dynamically adjusting according to the frame rate of the content. It does that if you're using G-Sync, using variable refresh rate. If you're not in a variable refresh rate environment, you're not using the G-Sync module, then it is just going to display your static refresh rate instead. And you'll see it does wipe periodically again, and I know that can annoy some people. In general, I found this feature a little bit distracting, to be honest, as an FPS counter, and not just because of the screen wipe. And I think they probably could have done something which is a bit less distracting to wipe the screen and refresh the pixels there. But they've chosen that screen wipe, and that is a bit distracting. But in general, I just found the overall dash a little bit just slightly annoying, but some people will be getting on with it better than others. I prefer the on-screen display of the frame rate, which is another option here. I might as well show you that quickly whilst I'm here. So that's found in the gaming section of the OSD under FPS counter. And you can have that displaying a number or a bar graph. So it's just in the top left. You can't customize the position, it's always top left. And then there's the bar graph, so that will give you a little bit of information about the recent frame rate, so you can see if you've had sudden dips and that kind of thing. Has a good polling rate, just like the live dash. It does update quickly, but not stupidly quickly, because some features like this, they flash so quickly between different numbers that it can actually be quite difficult to read them. So this one sets a quite good rate in that respect. So I'm now going to activate PC control and show you the Armoury Crate implementation of the live dash feature. You'll see straight away it's got this strange little animation. You can set that up. You can use your own GIF, or you can have one of the various preset GIFs, or GIFs if you prefer. I don't think anyone really prefers GIF, do they? Now, curiously enough, I had AuraSync disabled, but the live dash PC control feature enabled, and it didn't actually show the monitor. I had to enable AuraSync to show the monitor and therefore be able to use live dash with this Armoury Crate software. So I think you might need them both enabled. I'm just going to disable AuraSync and see what happens. And now you can see the monitor's disappeared. So that's a bit of a strange implementation. You do actually need Aura Sync enabled as well as Live Dash PC control to use this, which is a little bit janky if you don't actually use both features at the same time, but that's how they've done it. So I've re-enabled Aura Sync. I'm just going to turn off Aura Effect so it doesn't distract you in the video, and we can therefore focus on the Live Dash feature instead. So I can then access that by pressing the little arrow. So you can see there, image or animation, different preset animations, or you can have a custom image/animation. Just choose your own. And I've noticed that some of these just say image file no or image file number. So I don't know why they're not loading some of them. I think you've seen in this video so far that the lighting feature and the Live Dash can be a bit quirky at times. But you get the idea, although most of these seem to be image file no or image file number. Maybe they're corrupt somehow. I don't know. And there's also hardware monitor, and that allows you to monitor things like the temperature of your GPU or your CPU or your motherboard. Lots of different temperatures you can monitor here. And you'll also notice, if you're into hardware, if you're into these kind of things, yes, I do have an RTX 3090 and a processor which is several generations old. Big mismatch there. I'm more than due an upgrade for the processor and the rest of the system in general for that matter. But you can see there it says graphics card temp, so it does give you a readout there. You can have it look at voltages, fan levels as well. Depending on your hardware, you may not be able to monitor all of this. So it's now going to flick between the fan speed of my CPU and the graphics card temperature. There's also CPU frequency, or you can have it display things which is the same as you can do in the OSD. So the game visual, FPS counter and input source. And then there's custom banner, that's the final option, and you can just type some text there, choose a banner design, and that just allows you to have your own little banner there. So yes, as I said before, some people might find this quite useful in general, the Live Dash feature. For me personally, I just find it a little bit gimmicky, and I would have been quite happy if they didn't include it, to be honest, but it's there if you want to use it. So back to the menu then. The shortcut keys I was referring to earlier, I showed you. There's one to the left, one to the right. At the moment I've got that set to brightness for the one on the left. The one on the right is set to color temp, but you can set them to other things if you prefer. And that's found in the main menu system under shortcut. Shortcut right and shortcut left, so you can set that to various different options there. So you don't have full control, you can't set it to absolutely everything you want. You'll see there is power off or the main menu, so if you just press this again, it'll go into the main menu. You can see that that's highlighted in red there. But if you twiddle the dial, you can get to power, and that's how you power off the monitor. So you then click the dial in to select whatever it is that's highlighted. So the main menu then, there's OD, overdrive, that's explored in the review. Extreme and normal and off settings. Normal is definitely the optimal setting there. Game Plus, various different features here. Crosshair, various different designs. You can see a little green cross in the middle there. There are other designs as well that you could see there. You can't customize these, they're just the designs shown. There are also a few more if you scroll down. Also just one more, there's just also blue coloured cross. There's a timer, an on-screen timer feature, which I showed you just before, but just as a reminder, just at the top left of the screen there, counts down from whatever you've selected. It's a stopwatch feature, and again that's the top left, and that counts up. There's FPS counter, number or bar graph, and I showed you this earlier in action. But just as a quick reminder, just displays the refresh rate that the monitor's running at, which will move according with the frame rate if you've got G-Sync active, and that's again in the top left. There's then display alignment. This will give you some guidelines on the screen as shown, just to help you line up multiple monitors. Next you've got game visual, so these are your presets, various different settings here. Racing mode is the default, my preferred. There are others though, scenery mode. You'll find that these grey out various different settings depending on the mode you've selected. They make various adjustments to the image. They don't actually achieve anything you couldn't achieve with manual adjustment in the OSD anyway. You can see that locks off gamma and makes its own adjustments to gamma. And it could actually be that it does skew the gamma curve in a way that these standard gamma settings wouldn't give you. So it maybe does make some adjustments that you can't achieve with manual adjustments, but you can't override them, and none of them are attractive adjustments. Cinema mode, it's just quite a bright look to the image overall, and again it locks off the gamma and probably makes some changes there. It does look like it's flooded the image a bit. RTS RPG, and again, don't think that just because you're playing an RTS or RPG game that you should select this mode. I mean, this particular setting isn't so bad, and actually you do get quite a lot of customization, so if you like how it looks then fine. And this FPS mode just makes other adjustments. Something to note though is that racing mode does block off this 6-axis saturation control, so this is only something you would get on various other presets including this FPS mode. So if you do want to make manual adjustments to saturation, you've got red, green and blue, as well as cyan, magenta and yellow, then you would have to use one of these presets that allows that. I don't personally like these adjustments. I find that if you do find things too saturated and you want to make some changes here, you tend to find that some shades become undersaturated quite quickly, others remain oversaturated. Very difficult to get the balance right, but it's all according to taste. If you want to do this, then absolutely feel free to do that. And there's sRGB mode. This isn't to be confused with an sRGB emulation setting. This is actually completely separate. All this does is, again, it makes other adjustments, but it also locks off your brightness and contrast, which is quite annoying to be honest. Or in particular the brightness adjustment being locked off is annoying. Also color temp, gamma. There's dark boost, again available in some settings but not others. So it is available in racing mode, this one. So I've got legom.nl, the black levels test, open at the moment. That's the website, legom.nl. And I'll be able to demonstrate what the dark boost setting does quite nicely here. So level 1 lightens up these dark shades so they don't blend in as readily. Be aware that what you see on the screen is not exactly what you'd see by eye. It's not a good representation, but it will give you some idea of the relative differences for different levels. So it just brightens things up further and further. Unlike some settings of this type, it doesn't have a dramatic effect on your black point. So you don't lose contrast in the same way that you would with some of these settings. Sometimes it just completely floods the image. So this one's actually quite granular in that respect, and it, or should say, it's better targeted in that respect. And also if you look at medium shades or brighter shades, it leaves them well alone, particularly with level 1. So it's actually meant for a competitive advantage, and it does that well, it achieves that well, and it does that without upsetting your contrast, it does that without upsetting the image elsewhere. Again, it can give a flooded look, a blocky look, an artificial look, whatever, so it's really designed for that competitive edge, but it's actually better implemented than many settings of this nature. Whilst I've got Legom open, I just want to point something out, because I've seen some other reviewers are not aware of what this does. DP, SDR, YCBCR, sRGB, gamma, this doesn't have any effect if you're using a full range RGB signal, as I am at the moment, and as most people will be. So it doesn't use the sRGB gamma curve if this is active versus not active or anything like that. This is actually something which only applies if you've got a YCBCR signal active. You'll see it has absolutely no effect on gamma. You can see that from Legom. But if I change the color output format so it's no longer RGB, it's actually YCBCR 444 in this case. The other would work as well, to at least get this setting to do something. You'll now be able to see dramatic differences with Legom. Without this active, things look completely crushed together, completely wrong, so this just applies gamma corrections when you've got a YCBCR signal, and you can do that separately for DisplayPort and HDMI. Next you've got brightness, contrast, usual controls there for image. Variable backlight explored in the review in quite some detail. Different levels, level 3, 2 and 1. I do like to use level 2 from time to time, sometimes level 3, or off, off is quite useful on the desktop. Again, this is all explored in the review in some detail. There's aspect control. There are just two settings here, and this just applies if you're running a non-native resolution, and full is designed to use all pixels of the screen, whereas aspect is designed to use as many pixels as possible without distorting the image, without stretching, without messing up the aspect ratio. Blue light filter. Different levels here. This is explored in the calibration section of the written review, level 4 being the strongest, level 0 being off. These settings are quite good, quite effective, but level 4, the most effective one, that actually locks off the brightness as well. It sets it to quite a low level, and for the maximum blue light reduction you would have a relatively low brightness level, but there's actually a setting which is more effective than any of these, and also this particular blue light filter, like many, it imparts a green tint because it maintains a strong green colour channel. So an alternative which I prefer, if you want to achieve a low blue light effect, is to set the colour, and I can do this with my shortcut key, and that's actually why I've got it as a shortcut key. You can change the colour temp. You see there are various different settings here. If you set that to 4000K, that is a very effective low blue light setting. Everything has a sort of amber glow to it, an amber tint, but you can adjust the brightness and it doesn't have that green tint, and it is very effective. It has a massively reduced blue colour channel. So this is my preferred low blue light setting in the hours leading up to bed when you should be reducing your exposure to stimulating blue light. There's display SDR input. This is set to sRGB by default. That is the sRGB emulation setting. This is the proper sRGB emulation setting, where you can set wide gamut depending on your preferences, depending on how you like things to look. If you want things to look more vibrant, that's wide gamut. sRGB, more accurate for representation within the sRGB color space, which most content is created for. And this is just for SDR, not for HDR, incidentally, which is why it's called display SDR input. Very appropriately named. This sRGB emulation setting is wonderfully implemented. As I said, it's actually enabled by default and it doesn't lock off anything else. You can adjust brightness, you can adjust color channels, you can adjust anything else you want. So this is really how an sRGB emulation setting should be implemented. Next you've got color temp, which I showed you. If you select user mode, you can manually adjust the red, green and blue color channels. 6-axis saturation, that's grayed out with my race mode or racing mode preset, but I showed you that with some of the others. Various different gamma settings, 1.8, 2.0, 2.2, 2.4, 2.6. 2.2 is the default, and my unit was well calibrated for that, and in fact for the other settings as well, but they can be a little bit off. This is really just a way to increase or decrease the gamma, but most people should be just sticking to 2.2, that should be fine for them. There are those other settings which I went through just before. Input select, pretty self-explanatory. There's also an input auto switch setting if you want to make sure the monitor is not automatically selecting an input and you want to make sure you're manually selecting that all the time. That can be turned off. Shortcut keys, which I've been through. Lighting effect, which I've been through. System setup, you can change the language that the OSD is displayed in. Change the sound options, and that's just for anything connected to the 3.5mm jack, because this monitor does not have integrated speakers. And there's a mute option as well to mute the jack. You'll see there's a little volume bar at the bottom of the OSD there. It's actually shown on all different pages of the OSD. Auto SDR brightness, this employs a light sensor, and that's at the top of the monitor, little sensor unit, and it'll automatically adjust the brightness of the screen according to the room lighting conditions. I don't like this feature very much. I have to say it's not the worst type of feature of this nature which I've used, and that's because you can't actually adjust the brightness, so you have some say in brightness. The problem I have is even with brightness set to 100, I find in many lighting conditions it's just dimmer than I'd like. I mean, this is a very dim room, and I'd say the brightness level here is roughly appropriate, but when it's in a brighter room, I sometimes find that even with this set to 100 and this setting active, it just isn't bright enough. So I would have liked to have seen more aggressive control at the higher end. I do like the way that you can actually adjust this, and it adjusts a little bit around the brightness setting you select, but it does definitely need a bit of opening up at the higher end. Next is eco mode, and when you first use the monitor, first turn it on, it will try and put this on unless you select no or cancel or whatever it was. And this is a brightness limiter, so this will limit your brightness quite significantly, and that will decrease your power consumption. And it can make sense. Some people really do set their monitor to an obnoxiously high brightness setting, and manufacturers don't help by often having it by default set to a very high brightness level. Sometimes people just leave it there, so that can really just use unnecessary energy. That's what that's for, but if you know what you're doing with brightness, set it as low as you can comfortably manage or is suitable for your viewing environment and your own eyes. That's fine. You don't really need to use this eco mode, but that's what it's for anyway. Warning message HDR, that just puts a message on the screen when you enter HDR. Don't know why it's called a warning message. It's more of a notification, really. It's not really warning you that you're running HDR, it's telling you. Anyway, DisplayPort Deep Sleep and HDMI Deep Sleep as well. If you find that your computer goes to sleep or your system goes to sleep and then it wakes up again but the display doesn't wake up with it, it could be because of this deep sleep setting, so try turning it off if you're having issues with that. If you've got it enabled, it will slightly reduce the power consumption. It will allow the monitor to go into a deeper state of standby automatically, although not quite as deep as if you use the power off function. So just be aware of that. Key lock, that will just stop people using the monitor, and it does say check quick start guide to cancel this function. Now, I'm often asked, how do you unlock the keys? People will accidentally activate this feature, and in this case I've never done this, but I'm just assuming you press, nope, that didn't work. I'm starting to sweat now. Usually just hold one particular button for 10 seconds. Ooh, I might have to actually read the manual on this one. It's a bit of a tricky one. Let's see. I'm now holding the right shortcut key. So I've tried holding in pretty much everything I can think of for 10 seconds and it doesn't do anything. Okay, I just didn't do it for long enough. You just press the joystick in. Sorry, not the joystick, the little dial button in. So press the enter button, the select button, whatever you want to call it, and you hold that for about 10 seconds. It could have been slightly longer. And hopefully, because I've mentioned this, people won't be hounding me in the comments asking how you unlock the OSD. This OSD setup, you can change the position of the OSD on the screen, and you use the dial to change it. It's only horizontally that you can change it, not vertically. OSD timeout, that's how long in seconds the OSD will be displayed before automatically collapsing in on itself, disappearing. You can just use the back function, or in fact the exit function makes more sense to get rid of it. You can change the transparency level if you like. I don't really care for this myself, not really bothered either way. Live Dash, which I've been through. There's then information, so this will show you various different things such as the resolution, the color depth, format, range, whether it's running an SDR or HDR, so different things about the signal. So the reason it's 8 bits per channel, that's the standard for SDR. Most of the content you consume is 8 bits, so that's fine. And if you select use default color settings in NVIDIA control panel and you're under SDR, then that's what this will be. I do explore this a little bit in the review, but you can select 10 bits per channel or 12 bits per channel. For most people that's useless, but where it's certainly not useless is if you are actually using those bit depths in your content creator, that's great. Or for most people, when you have HDR active. So I'll just activate HDR, and this will change the options available in the OSD as well. So you'll see that game visual is grayed out. You can't adjust the preset. On image, it just says peak white nits 1400, and that's grayed out. I have actually shown this in the review, the options that are available, but I think it's worth going through it again in this video just quickly. So you see that you can't adjust that, that's just set, that's part of the specification. And you can't change the blue light filter. Display SDR input, that's for SDR, so that isn't something you can adjust. You can't adjust the color temperature. So you could have that low blue light setting active if you wanted. Of course, this goes against a bit of what HDR does, and HDR is very high brightness, so it's going to be lower blue light than if you had a higher color temperature selected, but not necessarily low blue light, because HDR still pumps out a lot of luminance in some situations. And you can see as well, dark boost is active. Again, that will upset what HDR is doing, so I wouldn't touch that, but if you have to or you really want to, you can do that. And now if I go to system setup, go back to information, so it's using its correct default color depth of 10 bits per channel, which is correct for HDR10 content, which is the HDR format that this monitor is designed to display. And it says format RGB 444, so that's 10 bits per channel, full range RGB, even says range, full range, and that EOTF setting that's just telling you that it's HDR. And just the very last setting there, all reset. That resets everything to the factory defaults. So that's all there is to the OSD on-screen display menu system of the ASUS PG32UQX. Be sure to check out the full review on PCmonitors.info. There's a link to that in the description of the video, alongside information about how you can support the work that we do.